The wooden frame of the Sodder family home in Fayetteville, West Virginia, did not just burn on Christmas Eve of 1945. It vanished in a roar of heat and wind that seemed to defy the very laws of physics. When the sun rose on Christmas morning, George and Jenny Sodder stood over a smoking cellar where their life used to be. They expected to find the remains of 5 of their children. Instead, they found nothing. No charred bones, no teeth, and no biological evidence that 5 young humans had ever been in that house at all. It was as if the children had simply evaporated into the winter air. The night began with the usual holiday chaos. 9 of the 10 Sodder children were home. The eldest son was away in the army. Around midnight, a strange phone call woke Jenny. The woman on the other end laughed and hung up. Jenny noticed the downstairs lights were still on and the door was unlocked, but she assumed the children had just been careless. She went back to sleep. Not long after, a heavy thud hit the roof. Within 30 minutes, the house was an inferno. George Sodder was a man of action, but that night, every move he made was thwarted by a series of impossible coincidences. He ran to the garage to get his ladder to reach the attic windows where the children slept, but the ladder was gone. He tried to start his 2 trucks to drive them closer to the house to use as a platform, but both engines, which had worked perfectly the day before, refused to turn over. When he tried to call the fire department, the phone lines were dead. A neighbor eventually drove to the station to alert the firemen, but they did not arrive until the house was already a heap of ash. The official report stated that a faulty fuse started the fire. George and Jenny never believed it. George pointed out that he had recently had the house rewired and inspected. Furthermore, he remembered seeing the downstairs lights on while the house was supposedly burning due to an electrical failure. The most haunting detail was the lack of remains. A typical house fire, even one that burns hot and fast, does not reach the temperatures required to cremate a human body completely. Bones and teeth are incredibly resilient. Yet, the fire marshal insisted the children died in the blaze. Suspicion began to harden into a lifelong mission for the parents. They remembered a man who had come by the house months earlier seeking work. He pointed to the fuse boxes and warned George that they would cause a fire someday. Another man, an insurance salesman, had become enraged when George refused to buy a policy. He told George his house would go up in smoke and his children would be destroyed because of George's vocal criticisms of Mussolini and the Italian government. The Sodders were Italian immigrants, and George was known for his blunt, anti-fascist opinions in a community that still held complex loyalties. The family began to suspect the fire was a cover for a kidnapping. They heard reports of a woman seeing the children in a car as the fire burned. Another waitress at a roadside hotel claimed she served breakfast to the 5 missing children a week later. Each lead went nowhere. The local authorities seemed strangely eager to close the case, even after a private investigation revealed that the phone wires had been cut by a human hand, not burned through by fire. In 1967, 22 years after the fire, a letter arrived with no return address. It was postmarked from Central City, Kentucky. Inside was a photograph of a young man in his 20s with dark, wavy hair and intense eyes. He looked remarkably like Louis Sodder, who was 9 years old on the night of the fire. On the back of the photo, a cryptic message was scrawled in Italian and English. It mentioned a boy named Louis, a brother, and some random numbers. The Sodders hired a private detective to go to Kentucky and find the man in the photo. The detective took the family's money and was never heard from again. George and Jenny never saw their son, and they never got an explanation for the mystery of the photograph. They refused to give up hope. They erected a massive billboard on Route 16 that displayed the faces of the 5 missing children, offering a reward for information. They wore black for the rest of their lives as a sign of mourning, yet they kept the billboard up for decades, staring out at the passing cars. Jenny Sodder spent her final years tending a garden on the site where the house once stood. She turned the charred earth into a shrine of flowers, never accepting that her children were dead. When she passed away in 1989, the billboard finally came down, but the questions remained. If the children died, where were the bones? If they were taken, where did they go? The mystery of the Sodder children remains one of the most chilling cold cases in American history, a story of a Christmas night that turned into a lifetime of searching for ghosts.